afternoon, everyone, and sorry for the back noise. I guess they will fix that in the technical team. I would like to welcome you all to this session. I would like to also welcome those who are following us online. I think it's a very important session where we will be discussing about supporting investments for a more digitalized energy grid, electricity grid. And I think there have been many people registered, many people following online as well. In the previous session, I don't know if you were in the introductory panel that we had, probably heard my director, Paula Pino, referring to the climate and energy ambition, and also linking it to the current energy context, and highlighting the fact that if we want to cope and find solutions to the current crisis, we have to accelerate the energy transition. I think she also underlined very clearly that we need a smarter and interactive energy system, and the main challenges that we are facing. I think that was echoed by Director Piers Donoghue as well, who's working more on the IT side. We all know that the digitalization of the energy system is at the core of the twin green and digital transition, and that it will play a big role in the implementation of the Green Deal, but also the REPowerEU plan. We've got 6 sessions this afternoon where we are addressing different facets of this interesting subject. And the one which is the one now opening is the one addressing the issue of investments. And we know that that has been an issue which has been mentioned by many stakeholders to whom we have talked. And this is why we decided to focus one session specifically on it. On this issue, we know that the transformation of the energy sector requires massive investments in the electricity grid, both in cables, but also in smartness. Paula gave some figures for a city in her introductory speech. Overall, at the level of the European Union, we estimate that we are close to 600 billion euro, which will be needed in the next decade in terms of investments. And several actions have already been launched to support the development and integration of digital solutions. In particular, the current EU multi-annual financial framework provides support for digitalizing the energy system. I should mention as well the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which provides additional funding, which should be based on the recovery and resilience plans of the member states. And in several of these plans, member states have recognized the potential of digital solutions to increase energy efficiency, to accelerate the penetration of renewables, and to decarbonize in general. And several of them have introduced measures to also support research and innovation for the development of innovative technologies contributing to the energy transition. Talking of funding, I should also mention certain important projects of common European interest. The IPCIs support also the objective of accelerating the digitalization of the energy systems. And all those investments are particularly crucial, and I would like to underline 2 reasons for that. I mean, firstly, having a smarter electricity grid is required to achieve our ambition for our energy system. More than ever, I think we all agree that we need to reduce our energy use while at the same time integrating an increasing amount of renewables in the electricity grid. Think, for instance, of our aim to double the capacity of solar PV by 2025. So digitizing the electricity grid will help us to add flexibility to the energy system, and therefore will help us also integrate a larger share of renewable in the electricity grid. A smarter electricity grid can also bring other benefits, allowing, for instance, a faster deployment of electric vehicles or the development of energy communities. And these are points that were mentioned also earlier. Secondly, investing in digitalization of the electricity grid will allow us to avoid additional expenditures to enhance the energy grid, to make it fit for the Green Deal objectives. And I think that was also exemplified by Paula. just a few minutes ago, I would like also to bring another example, which is the one of the Fluvius, which is the Belgian distribution system operator. In their investment planning for the next 10 years, they've earmarked 4 billion euro in planned grid investments to achieve the energy transition. And they told us that an additional 2 billion would have been needed if the investments had not included smart solutions. So I think that is a clear example of how smart grid can reduce investments in the overall system. The a smarter electricity grid means a grid that is fit for purpose for the energy system of the future, both in the short and long term. And as a matter of fact, digitalization is already happening across Europe, and there are concrete examples of the benefits that this can bring. I mean, I bring you another example, which I found interesting. That's the Finnish transmission system operator called Fingrid. Don't know if there are any Finns with us this afternoon, and they've implemented a digital twin, and that was very interesting. That tool helped them manage their assets and operations, and they use that tool also to better plan their investments, taking into account different scenarios. And they also were able, with that tool, to reduce the data collection workload, and therefore to spend more time on data analysis. And thanks to the digital twin, they were able in Finland to save cost and be more efficient. We also have several good examples of interconnection smart grid projects under the Connecting Europe facility, and there will certainly be more in the future since the new Tnd regulation encourages investments in this area. Now, if we turn to the side of research and innovation, Horizon 2020 and now Horizon Europe are also implementing many projects that contribute to the digitalization of the electricity grid. My colleagues told me about the IE Electrics project, which was funded by Horizon 2020, and which consists in working with distribution system operators to build flexible and smart microgrids that connect local energy communities and improve consumers' involvement and very importantly, develop new technical solutions and new business models. For those who are interested, our colleagues from the CINEA agency have collected all these great examples that they've supported through the research program, and they put them, they bundled them together in a nice brochure, which you can see on their stand outside. So I encourage you to have a look. This is very impressive. Nonetheless, to achieve the transformation of our energy system, the speed at which digitalization is happening needs to increase substantially, and doing so requires to step up investment in the digitalization of the grid. In a State of the Union speech on the 14th of September, the President of the Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, said that we need to, in the current energy crisis, not just a quick fix, but a change of paradigm, a leap into the future. And I think this is also what investments in digitalization are. And to ensure that these investments actually take place at a fast pace, we need to foster them effectively. We need a regulatory framework that supports investments in digitalization, and that is also supportive of innovative solutions. And we also need, as Pierre said earlier, coordination and cooperation among the main stakeholders, and that will be crucial if we want to step up investments. And these two issues will be addressed in our Digitalization of Energy Action Plan, which should be adopted in the coming days. We'll address the investments in the digitalization of the electricity grid. It will propose concrete actions for doing this, and this is a subject that we've been discussing thoroughly with many stakeholders in the preparation of the action plan. And I'm very happy that we will be able to exchange again on that topic with the distinguished panelists here. They are very important actors in the system, in the energy sector, and I'm looking forward to listening to what they have to say on this topic. And I think now I've finished, and I'd like to, without further ado, pass the floor to my colleague from DG Connect, who will say a few words, or I'm passing straight to the moderator, Peter Palinski, Professor and Director of Institute at TU Delft. Peter, the floor is yours. Thank you very much to all for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Also from my side, welcome to and thank you for joining our session today about supporting investments for a more digitalized electricity grid. As said, I'm Professor for Power Systems in Delft, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator of this session today, the Master of Ceremony. The main item of this session is these ladies and gentlemen that you see in front. The high priests of power system policy, power system planning. They are very busy right now in getting the grid ready for the challenges that lay ahead of us, and we are curious to learn a lot today on what is important and what to take care of. We will start with 5-minute pitches by these personalities here. And the start is done by Peter Vermaat, Secretary General of EUSEW entity. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Peter, for your nice introduction, and welcome to everybody. I'm a bit in doubt where to look. So I look to the audience. I think, I hope you don't mind, Peter.
Camera is there.
And the camera is there,
don't watch.
So I'll find a bit of my way. But thank you. And well, on a more serious note, I think I'm very happy to represent the EUSEW entity on this occasion in the European Energy Week. Although when referring to investments, the EUSEW entity as such, obviously, is not providing investments, but we are mandated by the European Commission to represent DSOs in Europe to work on the conditions for investment. Like also ENTSO-E, who is speaking after us, as a mandate to work on network codes and guidelines, make them future-proof and make sure that conditions for DSOs to invest and develop are optimal to make the objectives for the energy transition. And in doing so, we have been established only roughly 1 year ago, and we can say that already we represent now over 900 DSOs across Europe, comprising 250 million connections. So we try to really bring together neutral technical knowledge on shaping future conditions. And now, if you ask me what would be the key actions to work on for smartening the grid and making it meet the future requirements, I think an example of that is working on network codes like we have done earlier this year on the network code for cybersecurity, very much related to the digitization of the grid. And another one is that indeed also together with ENTSO-E, we are cooperating on the digitization of energy action plan, more specifically on things like digital twin, already mentioned, I think, by Mr. Beruto, but also on developing some indicators that guide us to further focus our investments to enable to grow the smartness of the grid in the future. Now, if we do that, there are also some challenges, inevitably. I think it was already reminded that the crisis will accelerate our way forward. So it is not a good reason, but hopefully it helps. And I think that looking forward a bit more specifically, it's important to work on conditions to enable investment, both in smartening the grid, but also in expanding it. And last but not least, I think that once, together with regulators, we find the right indicators to work from, it will stimulate DSOs across Europe to invest in the smartness of the grid. So that is hopefully within your time limit. I didn't see you wave with your paper, Peter, so back to you.
Thank you, Peter. That was perfectly in time. The next speaker, or the next pitcher, is Norela Constantinescu, Head of Section Innovation of the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity, ENTSO-E. You have a bit more time now.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Peter, for introducing myself. We go now a little bit on higher on the voltage level, so we look a bit on cross-border transmission lines. As head of innovation with the ENTSO-E, I'm pleased actually to cooperate and to ensure the platform for these exchanges for the TSOs in the area of research, which was mentioned by Vincent Berruto before, but also accompanying actually the measures from low TRL level to higher TRL level, and working together with the policymakers and also with the regulators in order to enable those uptakes into the business units. I would also like to mention that in terms of activities of EUSEW, especially from the point of view of the deployment of innovative solutions, and digital solutions will be major part of these deployments, we have to ensure the development of an ecosystem. So with the policymakers, regulators, but also with the DSOs to have the vertical integration across the electricity supply chain, across the sectors. So we mentioned before electromobility, heating and cooling, hydrogen, because they have different architectures, they have different data models. And of course, across the planning, because we need to optimize the whole system and to integrate all these solutions which are available today, like flexibility options coming from different resources, like, for example, what we call the grid enhancing technologies in those tools, but also to ensure the huge investments which are ahead of us in order to be able to connect all these distributed assets. And I would like also to mention the fact that we have not to lose from our scope certain activities regarding the cyber space in Europe, and the electricity grids are critical infrastructure, so we have to look upon these. And in order to ensure this integration among the different actors, stakeholders, ecosystems, and solutions, we have to have probably foremost the interoperability. In terms of challenges, I think Peter mentioned a few of them. I think, yeah, we have to, and also Vincent mentioned the fast and complex environment in which we have to accommodate the new solutions. We need these fast developments. We need a constant, I think, priority setting all the time. And we have to react very fast. And of course, the speed on which we have to develop the electricity networks by using the digital solution will enable these fast developments. And I hope I am in time.
Perfectly. Thank you, Norella. Our next speaker is Jan Fromont, President of Tnd Europe.
Thank you very much. I like to come just after, because we saw the distribution and the transmission appraisal of the situation. So Tnd Europe is a high voltage and medium voltage manufacturer. So we make a product, a solution, and more software and services. So we are clearly in this digital aspect today to talk about this. So what's interesting in our activity is that we are not only on the grid, and we are supplying the power gen, so whatever it is, nuclear, gas, but renewable, wind farm, solar farm, etc. But we have also our activity in the demand side, so the heavy industry, refinery, data center, big buildings. So we see clearly the issue when we look in between, it means the grid, is that if we want to solve the uncertainty we see at the moment, and it's a full uncertainty, from where will come the power gen, which type of power gen it will be, gas, coal, from where, wind, if there's no wind, so solar, etc. And the consumption. We see clearly some big manufacturers switching from gas to oil at the moment, a big industry, some other trying to switch to full electrification. So it's uncertainty on the power gen, uncertainty on the demand side. So how should be the grid? Well, for us, it's a grid that should be much more flexible. And at the moment, I would say we are on the right way, but not at the tipping point. And efficient. Here, clearly, affordability is a key. And how to manage it? But for me, it's not a question of electrons. And the electrons more or less find their way at the moment. So from an EV to the building, to the grid, to the power gen, at least until the winter and before there's not too much EV or e-truck. The data, it's another equation, and it's not solved. What we are facing at the moment in our industry is that we talk a lot about interoperability, and it was mentioned, and Paula Pignot on the introduction mentioned it, but the interoperability inside the sector is a difficulty, but for our industry, what we see, the main difficulty is interoperability across the sector. So it means, again, my example of EV that we want to connect. EV, automotive come with their own protocol, an ISO 15118. You come to a building, which is often a private protocol. You come to the grid, which is an IC 61850. You go to the power gen, etc., etc. If you want to pay the charging, it's even worse. So I would say the big battle we are facing at the moment is interoperability across sectors. So it's not only a question of regulation, it's not a big part, maybe the grid code also, and it's also standardization. So certainly a strong connection with Sense and ELEC or ETSI. So to make it happen, as I say, all this digital will generate data to make the grid more flexible. And here, I would say the challenge is smart grid. We mentioned it, but it's not enough. Smart grid is mostly automation. But we believe that really what we want to see is an active grid. The difference between the smart grid that we talk about for, I don't know, 12 years, 15 years, and an active grid is a real-time concept. Real-time where you can have observability, planning, and decision of operation. Because in front of all this uncertainty, you need to be more, let's say, anticipating and reactive. And that's what a recommendation, and that was written inside the clean energy package. Because in the electricity directive article 59, it's clearly written that the smart grid indicator should be implementing across the grid to make it more flexible and to make it more efficient. And that's clearly the wording we have at the moment. So my question, it will be after, but we are 3-4 years later, and we see the journey still not over. So the question, I will come back to it with the speaker today, is how to make it happen, because now it starts to be really critical to have an efficient, more efficient and more flexible grid and more active.
Thanks a lot, Jan, well said. Next speaker is Leila Sawyer, Secretary General of Current.
Thanks so much, Peter. So maybe first just a few words about Current. Current is a business association for innovative grid technologies, which can help increase the transfer capacity in the existing grid and also help build new grids as efficiently as possible. And why are these technologies needed? I think we've already heard that today. We have big ambitions for the coming decade. Just this morning, there was an opinion piece in EURACTIV saying that this is an interconnected Europe is the peace project for the coming decade. So very important. And this means we need to take into consideration all solutions, especially those that can bring results faster, that do not take decades to implement. From our side, the technologies are there, but there still need to be better incentives for investing in innovation. And we see that these technologies can bring great benefits to society as a whole and reduce costs, but it's still sometimes difficult for grid operators to implement this, and this needs to change. So solutions that current supports, for example, is to have more open calls for tenders, a more solution-oriented approach. An example of this is the NOAA Pathfinder project in the UK, where we say, okay, this is the problem, now who can provide a solution, and what technology can provide a solution to this problem? So a more transparent approach. We also see, and in the digitalization, in the Digitalization and Energy Action Plan expected in the coming days, we think it's important that there is a focus both on the consumers, but also to not lose sight of what capabilities grid operators need, as Jan mentioned already. Because also the system observability and management. Also, we really need to invest in that. In the stability, increasing the transfer capacity, frequency, voltage. These are all extra capabilities that the grid operator needs to invest in. Congestion management, fault localization, and then also to plan where is the most efficient place to invest in. So digitalization can help, making these investment decisions smarter. So finally, we also think that sometimes for some solutions to have this more open call process, but also to look at what solutions can provide solutions to multiple problems. And we think the smart grid indicators are also very important there. But as we say, it's been 4 years. And we need to risk that this doesn't become an academic exercise, but it really becomes a strong investment signal to operators. So thank you.
Thank you, Leila. The final statement, the grand finale, comes from the overlooking entity, Acer. We have here Jan Kostevc, team lead in energy infrastructure, gas and retail in Acer.
Thanks, Peter. Well, it's actually, for those who do not know Acer, we are, as mentioned, a European Union agency for the cooperation of energy regulators. So we are not ourselves a regulator. We are, again, an agency who's trying and doing our best to have regulators in Europe cooperate and coordinate as much as possible. On the question of digitalization, innovation, and so on, have to be honest, in the past we had quite a lot of issues, because it goes a bit against the basic principles in how regulators work. Many regulators in Europe believe that it's not up to the TSOs or DSOs or any other regulated entity to be innovative. Why would they innovate? You have research institutes, academia, companies who can innovate, of course, and then can produce their own products. And when we were sort of being asked this question over and over again, we took some time and then looked sort of in the mirror, and we had to admit that the regulatory frameworks are the basis which would enable innovation in Europe. And, regulatory framework is like the water, and, the TSOs, DSOs, and other regulated entities are like the fish swimming in that water. And the regulators are pouring that water into this aquarium, if you call it like that. So it's really pretty much on the regulators to choose the appropriate water if they want the fish to live and prosper. Maybe not the best analogy, but still, I'm just highlighting the importance of regulatory frameworks here, because actually regulatory frameworks have remained more or less the same for many decades now. We can talk about decades basically. So in plain terms, this water is pretty stagnant right now. It's not the best smelling one. And the thing is that for these new things like innovation, efficiency and so on, we need to have a different environment. The current environment is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. It simply says that, well, the TSO or DSO brings forward the investment, and the regulator then decides whether to grant the money for this investment, put the tariffs there to remunerate it basically, and of course apply maybe a bit of a percentage as a rate of return on top of that. What this implies, of course, is that higher cost investments are, a better and more suitable investment from a business perspective of such a regulated entity. And innovation is not a high-cost investment. Being efficient is not about high costs, it's actually about low costs, and doing the same thing with a small investment. And that's, I think, a fact that we all have to recognize, and if we manage to do something about the regulatory framework, that it would stop only looking at costs, it would see also the other side of the coin, that is the benefits that these projects bring, then I believe we can have a framework which would really drive innovation forward. And again, maybe here, what we did last year was that with a paper, we very clearly signaled that there is a need to do that. And we also, I think, very clearly said that the idea for that would be not cost remuneration, but benefit sharing. So this is a pretty novel principle in the world of regulatory frameworks. It exists, but not really often, and maybe not really focused on innovation. But here, what we're trying to say is infrastructure should be efficient. And I think one of the main drivers for efficiency is innovation, or smart technologies, and things like that. And if we stimulate efficient infrastructure, then we will also be stimulating innovation, smart technologies, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. We have now experienced the statements of these organizations that sets the tone for the panel later. I hope it will be a lively one among the panel members. But before we do so, we have Slido questions for you. They should appear on the screen. So there is a QR code that you can scan, and then you can vote on the questions. This will be another input to our experts here to comment and to take positions. So we'll give a few minutes for that. I believe there are 5 questions, right?
Waiting in silence.
Still moving. So the question is, which of the following 5 areas do you think is the most important when considering the promotion of investment in the digitalization of the electricity grid? The front runner, flexibility and demand response, active management, forecasting. No, not yet. No steady state yet. We're still in transient. Can we go on? All right. Good. So I think we have an impression on that question, on the audience opinion, and we can start the panel now. So I would like to start with Norilla. Maybe commenting on the opinions of our audience today.
I hope that I will remember, and anyhow, I take the point that yeah, we hope to swim in fresh waters, Jan. And I see that DSO cooperation was ranked the least. I hope that we will return. We will return that development. Commenting first on the flexibility, I think this is obvious because when we talk about the renewables deployment, then the first thing, both big scale like offshore wind, because this is a huge strategy we have inside EU, so with high capacities by 2030, so more than 100 gigawatt going to 350 by 2050 on one hand, and on the other hand, all this, so the solar strategy, which was coming with the Repower EU, and Vincent, you mentioned the doubling of the capacity. So these two elements, they just go hand in hand with the flexibility requirement. And in terms of flexibility requirement, of course, we need both short term, and this can be brought by can be enabled by digitalization, I would say. So it's important to have that. And we have many pilots actually which were developed across Europe, solving local issues, national, but also cross-border issues. So from ancillary services to congestion management to balancing type of services. And on the short term, of course, we have different resources. And for example, batteries, electromobility will come across, demand side response, maybe the heat pumps. On longer term, and this is mainly driven by development of wind sector and probably the periods in which for 1 week or 2 weeks we will not have neither the wind blowing nor solar. So there, even if we scale up or if we add all these capacities which are distributed, if we refer then to the energy which we need, we still cannot cope. And therefore we need this long-term flexibility. So I think it's because it goes hand in hand with the deployment of renewables, but we should not forget the grids because we still have to ensure security at all the time frames.
Correct. So the digital magic helps with getting flexibility done. That was also the opinion of the audience, apparently. So who does not agree? Is that the silver bullet that will save us all?
I will not disagree, but I would say the 4 links. How do you want to make a grid flexible and reactive, etc. If before you have not a TSO-DSO coordination, if you have not the observability, so observability is digitization and the digital twin, because it's now the buzzword, the digital twin, whatever it is, and the planning, and you come to the investment. Because how do you want to define the investment if you don't know a bit the future, at least in a couple of years? So I would say that your introduction was also on investment. With digitization, you can maybe estimate where you will have the bottleneck in your grid. Without digitization, you will not know. So in this case, if you don't know, you make interconnection across the country. It's fine for me. But for me, the bottleneck are often on the last mile, so it means local. So digitization certainly will be to avoid congestion on the last mile part. And here it's what we call sometimes local for local. But the flexibility for me will be to optimize locally the production and the consumption to have at least on the last mile a coherence between the two that we can escape, let's say, from the big grid waiting in the city or at the national level. So for me, the idea of optimization of the budget, cost reduction, efficiency, flexibility is to look at the equation local for local.
Thanks. Maybe just on because you use the term silver bullet, right? I think it doesn't exist. And here, I mean, even if you would put forward all of the potential areas where, you know, different smart investments could facilitate the grid, this still wouldn't sort of solve the situation. So we need to invest into classical grids. This is a fact. I think we cannot escape it. But I think we also, on the other hand, owe it to the consumers who are paying for that we are efficient in doing that. It means that, you know, we do that when it's needed, and we don't do that just because that's the first and best option for, you know, the business side. Thanks.
Peter? Ladies first, yes.
No, we completely agree as well that also we need to invest in traditional grids, but then also looking, okay, what are we going to need in 2050 to have a grid that is fit for purpose then, and then also work our way back to how can we do this then in the most efficient way. Also looking at new technologies for that. And, you know, and then really focus, I said it already, but what can we do to move faster? Because in the coming years, while we are building more grids, we will need to bridge to these solutions. So how can we already get now more out of the existing grid while we are planning for the future?
Yes, well, thank you. In fact, indeed, it has been emphasized from various sides that smartening the grid is important, but we also need just to expand either on TSO or DSO level. And especially on the last mile, I was happy you mentioned that, because recent insight shows that over 70% of renewables will be injected at the local grid, so to say, low voltage, medium voltage perhaps. So we need to think through clever strategies to get started, like Laida says, don't wait. And it will be a combination of smartening and expanding. And perhaps another note on that would be that when we look at conditions, as you give, obviously DSOs should be on the efficient road, right? That is our challenge as well. That is our how do you say, it is our craftsmanship to do that. But let's not forget that by investing both in expanding, but also in smartening the grid, the numbers in CAPEX and OPEX will both change. So that is also perhaps an aspect that is not so often discussed. But it's not only just about investing, it's also thinking about different patterns in OPEX money, or how do you say that, OPEX expenditures that will develop over time with a lot of data exchange and a lot of upgrades and things that come with it. So smartening is investing, but also operational cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I hear OPEX and CAPEX, of course, I need to react on it. But it's good because it's very important. It goes back to, you know, the understanding of the regulatory frameworks. And again, the problem of the CAPEX bias is there. And I think this one at least is recognized by many, also NRAs, not just other entities. But it's, you know, it's interesting to hear at the panel how well we agree that there is a huge need to invest into digitalization, smart, you know, investments, things like that. But still, you know, we knew that and we would have agreed on that even 5 years ago, probably, right? And yet, if you look at the past 5 years, even though, of course, there are a lot of individual projects, very interesting, and there are a lot of smart people working on these things, you do not see a wide deployment of innovative and smart solutions. I think also the consumers probably can recognize that. Yeah. And I think this is important. We have to find ways to actually implement smart solutions. I think there are many available already out there, mature smart solutions, which can be implemented very quickly. They will not be silver bullets. They will not, you know, solve our problems. But they are, you know, just one piece of the puzzle. Yeah? And of course, for that to work, we on the regulatory side have to enable that, have to create an environment which would invite such solutions to be presented by, if you call it project promoters, that is mostly TSOs, DSOs, but also maybe some third-party project promoters. So that, I think, is of essence. CAPEX bias is one thing, but we even go beyond that in the position paper where we say it's not just the separation into capital expenditures and operational expenditures. yes, of course, that's a problem. But an even bigger problem is that if you have a cost-oriented remuneration scheme, then the bigger cost investment should prevail in any sane business out there. And that's actually what's happening right now, and that's why we believe that we do not see a huge and wide deployment of smart solutions, which are on the lower cost segment, right, of potential investments. So again, it's not just about CapEx and OpEx, it's about looking the total expenditures, looking at all costs and saying, look, this is a low cost investment. We should not be looking just at remunerating the cost of it. We should look at sharing the benefits, and that would really create a strong incentive for regulated entities to go in this direction.
Norina?
If I may continue a little bit, so regarding the upscale of the solution, indeed, there is the issue of the upscale of different innovative solutions inside TSOs or DSOs, the business units. And you mentioned, Jan, so CapEx, OpEx, TOTEX, and I think we move towards that direction and towards the recognition also of the OpEx and the benefits which OpEx can bring. But there is also, I think, why I'm thinking why we cannot upscale across Europe, because this is what we will aim now with the digital twin, pan-European. There are still, we have to move probably stepwise, because we have the national specificities, which are coming with the different energy mixes, so different system needs in a way. We have also the grid typology, which is different, and then the length of the grid is different. In DSO, you have a lot of them, so maybe for the DSOs, the observability was very expensive, or took a little bit more time than, for example, in the case of the TSOs. So we have to bridge and to advance probably a little bit.
Use mine.
I hope that I didn't lost my. Yeah, I will use yours. So, yeah, this is a nice cooperation, and so sir. Then, of course, we have to cope actually with what we call the existing system, and how to move forward with the new solutions actually.
It seems as if we all know what the problem is and how to fix it. So this is an almost touching moment of consensus and harmony here. The question is, why is it not happening? As Jan has said, we spoke the same thing 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So we'll meet again in another 5 years with the same discussion. Is the market push and this evolutionary development sufficient, or do we need a more bold decision from policy? Yeah.
You're right. I believe TOTEX, if you pronounce the word, first time it was 10, 12 years ago. It was coming from a country that left Europe. It was an interesting concept. So, Jan, I understand the fact that the switch from CapEx to OpEx is certainly not necessary, but the TOTEX, at least activity where we look at both sides at the same time, because it's not the question to switch from CapEx to OpEx, it's not the point. It's really an optimization of the two. For me, at this point of the energy transition, it's important, because when we talk about circularity, reuse, remanufacture, refurbish, recycling, etc., it's clear that for the sovereignty of Europe, we need to optimize the CapEx investment along the life cycle. So for me, the TOTEX concept is even more relevant than before. And if I come to the smart grid indicator, which is again in the CEP and in the end of ACER, my question is, and not happening at the country level, my point would be, ACER needs, why it's not happening? Do you think that it's because the mandate of ACER is not enough powerful or not enough clear, or what is for you the reason? Or it's so complex matter that you hesitate to move all the dots at the same time?
Thanks. I think I can go.
That was a direct assignment, yes.
Yeah, maybe first to react on the TOTEX point. And I was wondering, maybe the audience is not that close to these terms, yeah, but in essence, the capital expenditures, relate to the assets that you own, and the operational expenditures relate to the operational costs. So how you run these assets, basically, and all that. Maybe most of you know that, but I have to admit that some years ago I didn't know that, so I had to learn. So the idea in most regulatory frameworks is actually to try to reduce the OPEX, try to push on the TSOs and DSOs to reduce their operational expenditures. And of course, if you have a smart investment, which is predominantly based on operational costs, it's really a strong counter-incentive to go that way. So that, of course, is one part of the problem. But again, what I was saying before, it's not just that. Even if you would have equal treatment of CAPEX and OPEX, you would have the TOTEX approach, you would still face a problem of the non-comparability of costs of investments. Just to give you one very blunt example, I asked some former TSO colleagues if they could provide me with a calculation, which Norela already knows quite well because I've shown it many times on some slides, between a hypothetical smart investment using already existing technology and a classical investment into overhead lines. The cost difference between the two was, I think, about 150 million for the mid-voltage, let's say, transmission line, compared to the, I think it was 2 or 3 million for the smart investment. And maybe if you bought it off the shelf, it probably would be even cheaper. The benefits of both of these investments were same. So same increase of transfer capacity. The remuneration effect for the TSO was that, in terms of the classical investments, they would be earning, I don't know, like 20-something plus millions in the lifetime of the investment, while for the smart investment, actually, in one of the calculations, they would be in a negative. And in one other, they would be just slightly in the positive. And that's just the financial aspects. Maybe there's also one other aspect which we fail to recognize here, and that's the stress aspect. What you're actually doing with many innovative investments is bombarding the operator with additional information, with pushing you push the efficiency of how you use the infrastructure to the physical limits of the infrastructure. That's the objective here. You try to be as efficient as you can with what you have in terms of physical assets. If you do that, you increase the operational stress. And that is also a huge factor. So why would any sort of sane person in the shoes of a regulated entity operating in such a regulatory environment choose to go on a path where they would have, first of all, on the business side, a negative outcome of the investment, and second of all, they would be very much under stress because they would be operating on the, limit of the capacity of their grid all of the time. And that's why, again, I'm emphasizing the fact that we need to change the regulatory frameworks. And it's, I'm coming from the regulatory environment. So it's sort of, I'm looking at the mirror right now and saying that we have to change things. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody else. But why this is not being done, and that's a very valid question, it is, I would say, largely due to the setup of how Europe works. I mean, we have individual regulatory entities. ACER does not sit on top of them. We are here to coordinate them. We're not here to tell them what to do. And then they may choose whether they want to do it or not. But this also implies more costs and more burden for them. If they go this way, then they would need to employ people who are very skilled with, analyzing cost-benefit assessment methodologies. They would have to have skilled people in different areas where they simply do not have them right now. So regulatory frameworks, regulated entities, all of these is a very, is a large elephant which you're going to have really huge difficulties to try to persuade to go in a different direction. You have to be very, very persistent if you want to achieve that.
Or not, but thank you. Okay. Yeah, perhaps you would like to take it. Okay. Well, I think taking a bit further what Jan is bringing from Acer, but also going back a bit to your earlier question, why is it not happening? And perhaps there is also a bit of a different perspective, because I think a lot needs to be done, but let's not forget that we have already done quite a lot. And to my feeling, in addition to what you say on regulatory systems and in a way getting the courage to get started, even if it is stressful, I think we should also recognize that we are only at the beginning of the understanding of the new system. So we have built a system in 100 years, so we know how it works, also on matters of stability and reliability. And we're just at the beginning of understanding of flexibility, even at local levels. So to me, it is also, in addition to what has been said, a matter of trying to find the courage in the paradox of uncertainty to start, but still keep a bit of the stability alive, right? So it is like balancing the two. And I'm very optimistic that by going step by step, we'll find a way, and then we ramp up a bit more. And for instance, if you look at, it differs a bit country by country, but if you look at the penetration of roof solar panels or electric vehicles, I think we are really leaving the early stages now and ramping up. So coming that, we'll find next solutions as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of both, I think.
That's a good point. So I also think that the digital smart world is a different beast than what we were used to. And there might be crippled regulatory mechanisms that push for a no change. And also digital assets have a different life cycle with software updates, and the pace is a very different thing. So I'm wondering, Leila, maybe you can comment on that. Is the power sector capable of dealing with that technology? I mean, we have it now for decades, and the pickup is rather slow. Will these power companies be the next Kodak?
On the technology side, the technologies are available, so the grid operators need to invest also in their capacities, and that's at all different levels. Even like tendering, for example, the way you tender for innovative technologies is also different. You can't just copy and paste it from the previous tender that you did, but to really think, okay, what is the problem here? So that really requires, at an organizational level, to do things in a different way. And when our members are talking with TSOs and DSOs, it's also for that person within the organization a challenge to get the rest of the organization to go along with, as Jan would say it, this new approach that doesn't actually necessarily make sense for the business, even if it makes sense from a societal perspective. So I definitely think that they can. The technology is there. Maybe there is a challenge now to find all the right people, and it does take some time. The difficult part is that it's really getting quite urgent now. What needs to happen in the next 10 years? So I definitely think that they can, but it will be a challenge.
But there is hope.
We have hope. Otherwise, we would not be here today.
Another aspect that sometimes surfaces when we still stay with this digital transformation is that many digital methods and technologies have a distributed nature. Yeah? It started in the internet with Web 2.0, and now it goes further with peer-to-peer functions and blockchain and so forth. So this is highly distributed, very inclusive, very bottom-up. And this is the other tradition that we have from the power systems. Could that be another reason why it just does not kick in for such a long time?
Yes, probably can, but I think there is a kind of move now towards, so on one hand, what we called the interoperability, because we cannot, probably develop in one block some central solution managing all the countries, all the systems, and so on. This will be a monster. So therefore, I take the example of flexibility topic, which was listed first. So there we started actually to develop this type of token interconnectors to ensure this interoperability between the different platforms, for example. So this can, in a way, organically grow. But there are many other things on which we have to act. And of course, it's still in the incipient phase, but I would still mention the open source approach, open for the code, so where everybody can actually play in the ecosystem and actually bridge, including for the skills which we need, and where actually the digital skills are needed also by the other sectors. So we have to fight also with the other sectors to get the skills inside.
Could not agree more.
And I think that also we can do more than we currently are on knowledge sharing. What are the experiences from the different pilots? Even if there are different specificities, I don't think every single grid operator needs to have their own pilot phase to start at the very beginning, or sometimes developing their own software or their own solutions when there are already commercially available that have been deployed in many places. And well, our members also see that sometimes it's easier in other countries, in the US, in Australia, and South America, that are moving much faster and taking these technologies and running with it. That there is more of a willingness to take this risk, and of course not risk of not that we want to risk a blackout or anything like that, but just to try different solutions and to indeed have a more stressful initially. So we do see that this knowledge sharing, that there is room for improvement on that. We are very happy with ENTSUI's Technopedia, which shares a lot of this information already. But also this, that you mentioned open source, but also this more willingness to learn from each other and to not all have to reinvent the wheel. Thank you.
I agree. You mentioned different technology. I'm part of different standardization body on blockchain, on some of this kind of matter. It's coming, but it will not change the world. If we want to have something efficient, flexible, it's technology is existing. I would say the new technology, the new algorithm will improve. Make it cheaper, make it with less carbon intensive. But we have enough power electronics, Leila mentioned, we have already, it will evolve, of course, everything evolving. But the basics are here. So from an industry perspective, it's more a decision from utility, but also connected to, as I said, the power gen and the demand side, because the grid is in between, so they need to adapt to the global environment and its data. So for us, for the industry, I would say it's more to have a view on what's happening. The investment, because it was also the topic of this session about investment, where it will be easier for us to have a clear view on what's happening not in 10 years, because even 2030, it's only 8 years, 7 years now. But let's say 3 years and 1 year, because otherwise we come to issue on supply chain and on urgency that we cannot solve. So the point is now to the good point, let's say, of software of digitization is that we bring, of course, software and observability planning. The good point of hardware is that we bring the right switchgear or hardware at the right place. So the combination of the two is critical. So I would say that midterm we need certainly a view of investment of TSO, DSO, and certainly regulation, ACER. Short term, the point will be on specific project. It can be a HV substation. It can be to know what is missing in the supply chain. Otherwise, no need to try to build a new grid somewhere if missing the switchgear, missing the software, missing the cables. So I would say in the current situation, I would say that there is a timeline which is important. What is short term, within 1 year? What is midterm? Midterm is electrification, I agree. Short term is efficiency, flexibility, and make the project implemented, really. So I would say the discussion here between the actors we are is certainly about how we solve the problem of supply chain, that TSO, DSO can implement this substation, this part of the grid within 1 year. Otherwise, we miss the mission.
That's true. Yes, life didn't become easier in the last months. So on top of this inertia that we had already, we have now supply chain problems. There were very insightful comments on digital opportunities and why they are not speeding up as we dream of it. But there was another line on the Slido question that triggered me a bit. The TSO-DSO interaction. Apparently nobody cares. Why is that? Do people maybe believe that in future there won't be TSOs and DSOs anyway because there will be some amalgam? Or what could be the reason that it was not ranked high enough? Any opinions?
I don't know. So my mic and mic of Peter shut down. So I don't know. Maybe this is a sign. I suppose that, no, of course we have to have this cooperation. And actually, I would say that, at least for myself, this is my bread and butter, to be honest, every day. I don't do mostly other things. Of course, we cooperate also on HVDC interoperability with the manufacturers. But maybe if we just narrow down, I think, to the data exchange. Maybe this is a very focused area, and maybe it's less visible from the outside. But I think, in terms of cooperation, we cooperate on a lot of things. And Peter, you can add so the codes and the whole framework actually around digitalization.
No, there is a lot ongoing, especially I think indeed also with the establishment of DSO entity, that there is a good, let's say, partnership also at a formal level. But going back to your question, is there any reason why it was valued so low? Perhaps like Norella says, it is not so visible. Perhaps it was just the last one in the row.
That could be it, yeah. Digital technology has quite a disruptive power. It is powerful if you introduce it to a new sector. We've seen this in other sectors, and now it hits the power sector in all its might. One of the outcomes could be that the former distribution system becomes a system operator. It has active assets, it will take over responsibilities, services. So how do you see the future enabled by digital technologies and also to the interfaces to the TSOs? And how do these borders and interfaces blur in the coming years?
Yeah, well, in fact, there is a lot. You could do a different panel on that one alone, but I can give some observations, but I'm certain that other panelists can add to that. But I think indeed that with the integration of renewables into the grid and the growing smartness, in fact, there is also a change in the operational system of the distribution system grids. And in fact, if I look at it a bit more from a distance, but also from my own experience being a CEO to one of the DSOs in the Netherlands, it is a technical change, but it has been mentioned before. It's also a bit of a cultural change. You need to get used to a different way of operating. So I think we need to work on both, on the technology side, with the panelists here at the table, but also on the different operational attitude that you need to operate the grid in a different way. And that will also just take time, training, gaining confidence into the new system. But I'm curious what panelists can add to that.
Just agreement, but Acer has an opinion.
Well, I mean, if the question is what the future will bring in that sense, I think we have sort of two options. One is that nothing actually will happen. Things will operate as they do right now. You'll have the same bunch of people discussing same things all over again in a couple of years. I really hope, of course, that's not the future we will see. But we have to recognize the fact that it's possible that we will see that future. I, again, would encourage everybody that we all put together our efforts and change the system. But if we manage to do the change, to make the change, then, you know, the future can really be something completely different to what we have right now. From the, you know, from going from the bottom of the sort of consumer levels, acting completely differently to what they were used to, not just prosumers, but also active consumers, through sort of demand response, things like that. We'll have a huge fleet of electric vehicles, which can play also a huge role to stabilize the grid, to help the grid out. We have, you know, huge amounts of renewables, and a lot of cooperation between the DSOs and TSOs will be definitely necessary to facilitate all of that.
Good point. So let's come back to the title of this session. It's about investments, how to promote investments in digital technology to make our grids more efficient, more green, more reliable, more affordable. I believe we shouldn't look at the grids alone. There's lots of things connected to it, so it's a backbone of many other sectors. And I wonder, how do you cooperate with these other sectors? I mean, there is energy as a service, as an idea, very customer-oriented. Also EV management, comfort, all these things that are in the end done with that energy, also in the industrial sector. So there are new ideas coming there, and they are fueled and lubricated by digital technology. And I wonder if you have plans to embrace these developments and these sectors and these players in your businesses. Because if you just say we have cables, a lot of copper, and we can transport energy, that was the last 100 years. Norella.
Should I give a try?
Pick up the hot potato.
Of course, we cooperate, and actually even in what we have as mandated tasks as EUSEW, so in our 10-year network development plan. So we start with scenarios, and there we started in the beginning, I think, with EUSEW, but we enlarged this, and today we have the views of electromobility sector, we have the views from the hydrogen sector, we have the views from heating and cooling, and afterwards, of course, we listen to them. So this is important, to listen to also the others, so to understand also their
and they also invest.
Yeah, they also invest. They have also their value creation, and we have to understand what is the meaning of value for them, in order to see actually how we can better stack the services which can create value for these other sectors, but can also benefit towards the electricity grids. And if we go down on this vertical supply chain, as I call the deep electrification, of course, you mentioned, Jan, so there are the prosumers. There is also the energy community, which is emerging, so next to the DSOs, and of course, the most important for us is the DSOs, because actually yeah, we need all these flexibilities. And on the other side, there is generation on your side, but also on our side. So.
Perhaps to add a little bit to the perspective of Norela, I think that when you look to the wider perspective, we could expect that when we find ways to unlock, to unlock the power of the consumer to drive a bit more the energy transition, then that would accelerate, I think, developments as well. That could either be through a clever market design, when you can reap the benefits of flexibility, or perhaps in initial phases you need also different systems to stimulate clients to participate and really unlock also the, let's say, required flexibility on a local level. You commented on it already earlier. So I would think that focusing on activating consumers will bring some acceleration if you look to the system as a whole.
Maybe a point for Vincent. In your community, you have, because it's very complex what we talk about today, it's an equation, and Jan mentioned it. It's you hesitate to push any dots because you don't know what will be the complete process at the end of the day. So in your community, you have some thousand of small DSO. How do you manage to not leave some of them behind, because it's so complex that I believe when a DSO is managing one village or a countryside, it's certainly not easy to maintain them about digital, blockchain, prosumer, EV connection in their village. How do you manage inside your entity this voice?
Yeah, that is a very challenging question, but it's not really, I think, like managing. It is, I think, hopefully a way that we can engage between all our members, which is very huge, right? We have 900 members, and in fact, like you were saying, if you look at all DSOs all over Europe, it might be 2,000. It depends a little on how you count. So it's a challenge in itself. At the other hand, while developments in market will also spread out, right? So it's not like managing from one point, even not from Brussels, right? Sometimes we think we can manage from Brussels. Even as an entity, we don't manage our members, right? But I think by generating a little of, how do you say that, pool, by having good conditions, the pool at the DSO and the DSOs locally will also emerge. But it's not like a grand plan that you can just design and manage. It's a challenge in itself.
Maybe just to say that in terms of stakeholder interactions in general, right? I think the new Tnd regulation is doing something in that direction, trying to improve that. It's bringing the, let's say, majority of stakeholders a bit closer to infrastructure development. Of course, that does not necessarily, as you know, mentioned before many times, pertain to innovation and things like that. But still, right? I think that's a good step forward. But maybe something which I wanted to say and which I think is missing is in the culture of many TSOs and DSOs, you know, when stakeholders are knocking on their doors, these TSOs, and I would expect also DSOs, are not necessarily answering, right? And this, I mean, you can have, of course, a stakeholder consultation on a specific process, but if you have, I don't know, a provider of a potential solution, of course, that would knock on your door and offer you to present what they have, I hear from them that they often see closed doors in front of them, and I think this is not good.
All right. According to the schedule that I received from our hosts, DG Enner, we are now at the end of the panel. I would like to thank a lot. It's always a pure joy to pick the brains of smart people, and we had today the privilege to have you here. It was very inspiring. I learned a lot. I hope this is also the case for our audience, in person here and also online. Investing in digital infrastructure, I think we got a consensus that it's the future. It gives us more flexibility, more power into our fingers to run the system better, to be prepared for the challenges. It was quite insightful to unwrap a bit the reasons why it's not happening. There are business mechanisms that are just not fluent enough. There are other traditions and reasons why we are not picking it up that quick. But I think we have a consensus on the urgency and on the need of investing in digital. What can we expect from that? If we take other sectors as a blueprint on having a little crystal ball on what will happen if we have a digital energy system. If we look at other sectors, what happened there, it's quite frightening. Digital technology has the power of tearing down barriers. So this is one of its intrinsic properties. It makes things more scalable. You can interact with hundreds and thousands and millions of customers if you want. It's not possible on paper, analog, but it's possible with a platform in the cloud or in the blockchain. So these are the things that are inherent in these digital magic things that we are integrating into the power system. But it's also very inclusive. So you give power to the people. You allow them, and that's most true for the distribution side. You are closest to the customers, and they are getting the mandates to be an active player in the future. They generate, they store, they trade with energy. So this is all new, and we have to be prepared for that. We had examples also in the keynote about digital twins that they can help to play around with a complex system that we would not understand otherwise analytically. And we can fast forward them into the future to see how investment decisions make an impact and make a change, make a difference. So this is all part of this digital transformation that we are envisioning for the power sector. Important, as we have heard today, is interoperability, standards, regulation. If you let it be a Wild West, this might go well for harmless sectors, but not for the power sector. This is not child's play. It has to work every day, every second, and that's why we have to be especially careful and cautious when introducing these fast-paced technologies that are just different than what we had the last 100 years. That's all from my side. I would also like to thank the audience for being here with us today, also our hosts, DG Ener, for making this session possible, this nice discussion, and especially our brain power today, the panelists. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.